Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with me, your host Tim Stillman, looking back on Sunday's reasonably drab 0-0 draw away at Tottenham. At the top of the show, I'd just like to say if you're listening on Monday, the day this comes out, it's the last day of voting for the annual FSA Awards, and Arseblog is up for Best Fan Media. I think the awards in their current iteration have been going 14 years, been nominated 13 times, won 5 or 6, I think. We'd love to win it again. It's been a couple of years. So if you wouldn't mind voting for us, again, that it closes on Monday. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, the chance is gone. But we're up against some stiff competition, the likes of the Anfield Wrap, TLCO, friend of the site, it's fair to say. So yeah, we'd love your votes. And yeah, that's that. Now we're going to go into therapy mode, I think, because we are going to talk about the 0-0 draw with Spurs and probably more besides. It's fair to say, I think it's kind of time to bang the gavel and have a bit of a state of the nation. Here to do that with us as ever is our co-host, Jamie Spanger. Jamie, how are you doing this evening in Melbourne?
I've been better, Tim. This is a hard one. This is probably the worst I've felt in a little while. The Chelsea one was annoying, like bad decisions against a top team. This one was a punch in the stomach that I've been dealing with since going to bed at 3:30 a.m. and then the NWSL at 7 a.m. So I'm grumpy and really excited to relive it.
Yeah, I've been watching, as much as I can of the NWSL playoffs. I watched the Spirit Thorns game on Saturday. Unfortunately, we won't derail the conversation by talking about that because this podcast does feel like a therapy session and not just for us, Jamie. I think it's fair to say a lot of the listeners, I think we've probably come to a stage where Arsenal have been in a funk for a couple of months now. We haven't spoken since the capitulation in Munich, which was very difficult to accept, I think, and I completely understand. If ever, as a fan, there's a time to, crash out, as people younger than me would say, I think it was after Wednesday night. So sometimes I look at my Twitter mentions after a result or something, and I'll keep this to myself, but I think, that's maybe a bit OTT, maybe, and it's all fine, like people are emotional and stuff. But on Wednesday night, I was a bit like, yeah, I'm with you. This is all fine. And like, one of the things about Wednesday as well, Jamie, was like, I tend not to do the mix zone and try to speak to players after a disappointing result, usually because they don't want to speak. But on this occasion, it was much more like, I don't want to speak to you at the moment. I'm feeling a bit hurt. So before, we go into Sunday, 1,000-foot view of Wednesday night in Munich.
Yeah, one of the most frustrating results, like humanly possible, I think. This is a Bayern Munich team that are riddled with injuries, really, really low on squad rotation and depth right now, and not good in form in the Champions League this season, it must be said. And in the Bundesliga, they're grinding out results, but they're not playing the best football. And I think in the opening 45 minutes, what was so frustrating about this result is Arsenal played so well in the first half. And I thought, this is a team that, this is what we want to see consistently against good oppositions. We want to see this kind of football. And then it was a total mental collapse. And I think we spoke a bit about, I think it was after the City game, and it was saying this result in isolation, not the end of the day, but when it just kind of adds up, it accumulates. The Aston Villa draw at the Emirates, and now we've got a Chelsea draw, United draw, obviously this result as well on the weekend, but it just felt like that was a summary of what it's been like to watch this team over the last couple months. And I think myself, probably you included, you're much more calm than I am, Tim, and the fan base in general were just saying, yeah, this result was probably coming, and it's frustrating because we could have seen it happening and it just played out in front of our eyes.
Yeah, Arsenal haven't beaten a team in the top half of the WSL this season. Probably the best team they've been. Well, maybe LCL. LCL or Benfica are the two best teams Arsenal have beaten this season, really. And, this game, Chelsea draw just before kickoff, which I think if Arsenal win, that just about puts them back into the title picture. I said in my vlog afterwards, like, that I think we're totally out of it, too far back and not playing well enough to go on the kind of run that will be necessary, even though I think Chelsea and City are going to drop more points this season, but I think we are as well. So that's that really. I do think it's about finishing in the top three. Lineup for this game, one change from the Bayern game. It's Kyra Cooney-Cross in for Victoria Pelova. I asked Renee in the pre-match press conference about the absence of Kim Little, not having a proper number 6, and she kind of said, yeah, we're working on it a little bit, which I think maybe exposes some stuff we didn't do in the summer transfer window, to be honest. But that was the only change. That kind of deck chair was rearranged. Kyra Cooney-Cross coming into midfield. Everything else the same. Any surprises there for you?
Not necessarily. I think, yeah, Kyra Cooney-Cross coming in was not a surprise. I think it was also a good thing. I think the one thing was Alessia Russo was dominant against Spurs last season in the striker position, but she had to drop into the midfield. And I think that was it's hard because I think there's a deeper conversation around this that we'll come on to of if there was other personnel, we wouldn't have to do that with Alessia Russo. But in this game, like, I think it was the best thing to do because you have to drop her back. You have to have more protection in the midfield. If you have Frida there, very vulnerable on transition. I think Spurs didn't do enough of exploiting that. However, there was times where they could have. So from the lineup, I thought, look, with what there is in this squad, I think I probably would have done the same. So I was empathizing with Renee at this stage. But yeah, it's frustrating. I think that's something we'll expand on maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this midfield full of number 10s, but when it comes down to it, Russo, when Kim Little's not there, Russo's the only one that Renee, and I get it, to be honest, but it is like, I think it is a bit damning of the squad build that we're having to do that. And, you know, in the first half, and where Renee has my sympathy slightly, obviously Kim and Leah are big players to lose. They just are. And pretty much any team would be hurt by that. I don't want to use that totally as an excuse because Chelsea missed Millie Bright and Sam Kerr for a whole season and still won the league. Like, you got to find a way. But also, I think Olivia Smith, excuse me, not quite being fit to start because she's had a hip injury. Chloe Kelly's got this ongoing knee injury. She's playing very few minutes at the moment. So out wide, there's less room for rotation from the start at the moment, where perhaps she has my sympathy a little bit. But Renee said in the post-match to me that the first half, the teams were feeling each other out a little bit. Is that what the first half looked like to you? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think to an extent there's a bit of that in this game. I think that almost Arsenal weren't certain of what Martin Ho's Tottenham would kind of pose to them. And I think that that's something we really saw. Maybe not, it wasn't a struggle in the first 45 minutes. It was just sluggish and slow. And I don't think Arsenal adapted the way that they would want to. Like, for example, something like Katinka Tandberg is a completely different number 9 to what Arsenal used to playing against when they played this Tottenham side. And this is a player that was dragging Lotte Wubbenmoy so deep into midfield. And then Steph Catley had to kind of change position. She was coming in as a right centre back. And I don't think that was something that Arsenal anticipated because it did look disjointed at the start. I think second half, it completely changes. And that's one of probably the only there's a couple, maybe Olivia Smith, but probably the only positive I can say is I think that Lotte Wubbenmoy really switches on in the second half and is able to see, okay, what is Katinka Tandberg trying to drag me into and how do I have to block her out of this game? But in the first half, I thought that one move from Martin Ho really rattled Arsenal and it meant that everyone was out of position. I thought Kyra Cooney-Cross and Mariana Caldente, they didn't have a bad game. They just had a boring and sluggish game. And I think because of that, they were rattled. How do we then approach this game and how do we kind of fill that midfield if Lotte is going to be holding that space and man marking such an active number 9? Olivia Holt likes to run around a lot on the transition. So I do think that this game, it felt as if Arsenal hadn't watched any footage of Tottenham coming into this game with Katinka Tandberg as the 9, expected it to be Bethany England and said, okay, let's deal with that and see what we can do from there. So from an Arsenal perspective, I think, yes, I think that there was a lot of teasing out. I just think from a Tottenham perspective, they knew what they needed to do in order to kind of nullify Arsenal. And I don't think they were necessarily the better team in the first half. I just think it looked like Arsenal came at this Tottenham side and said, this is Robert Villaham's Tottenham, let's see what we can do, and then had to kind of figure it out in the opening half an hour.
Yeah, definitely. I think in that opening 20 minutes especially, like, obviously Spurs have a lot of transitional threat, particularly with someone like Jessica Naz. And you're right, they were dragging players out of position. And I think Arsenal had to reorganise a bit because the first 20 minutes I was thinking, oh my God, this looks like Bayern again. They're just running through us. They're getting in behind that double pivot. I think you're right. I think we kind of reorganise a little bit. That probably comes at the cost of some attacking thrust. And I think that really highlights an issue with this team at the moment. Like, it's that analogy. I think Rafa Benitez used this analogy of the blanket where it's like it's a bit too short. And what do? Do you have cold feet? or do you have a cold chest because it doesn't fit? And that's kind of how I felt in this first half. It's like, okay, we need to reorganize a bit to be a bit more secure against transition, but then it kind of comes at the cost of some attacking threat as well, and good players just playing a bit too deep. And Russo had an effort just wide. Cunha Cross has an effort just wide. I do think Arsenal kind of shut the tap off really on their counter-attacking, but at the end of the first half, Arsenal have 0.37 XG, so you can't say they deserve to score off the back of that. 0-0 was fair enough at half-time, and Renee said afterwards she knew the second half would be important. She didn't go into detail, but she said there's something about the way Spurs set up in a second half. And actually, I think we saw this a bit against LCL. I watched their game last weekend against LCL, and they were much more vulnerable, I think, in the second half. But there's a double sub at half-time. Let's take them in turn. Taylor Hines on for Katie McCabe. And Renee said explicitly that this was about the yellow card. And she said it's a North London derby. There'll be emotions involved. This is the second WSL game in a row that Katie McCabe is booked for a very cynical foul and pretty much immediately substituted. We've seen her, she's still in the leadership group, but she's not wearing the captain's armband now, which means really she's gone down a rung in that ladder. I think this is concerning, I have to say.
Completely concerning. I think, look, Katie McCabe is a player that we have all known and loved so long at Arsenal because of the passion that she plays with, and because she's so energetic, and it comes at a bit of a cost sometimes. But it's kind of funny when you're 25. It's not funny when you're a senior player and you're a leader, and it's never funny to be doing stupid things like that. But it's almost like, okay, you're going out there, you're wearing the shirt, and you're doing everything for the badge. But then it's gotten to the point in her career now where it's like, if you're making stupid fouls in transition because you're frustrated, or or Jess Naz has come in behind you twice in the last 5 minutes and you're angry about that, and you're going to then put the team in a very vulnerable position against a game that they're not on top of this game. It's not like it's 2-0 or the momentum's in their favor. I didn't even think that was the case at all in this game. I thought if a team was going to score, it would be Arsenal, but I didn't think it was guaranteed, and that's exactly what we saw. That, to be able to just kind of like not think about that and have that short-sighted view is something that has, I think, gotten worse in Katie McCabe's game. And I think it's something, I don't know what the product of that is, whether it is competition, whether it is just a different manager. I don't think Renee Slegers is going to tolerate that kind of, not the personality, but that kind of like short-sightedness and just selfishness. I don't think she's going to tolerate that. And that's something that frustrated me against Chelsea a lot. And then Taylor Hines comes on and does a better job. And I think that happens again in this game. I think this is something in Katie McCabe's game that is creeping in and actually becoming detrimental. And she nearly did it for Ireland earlier in the year as well. Like, she could have had 2 yellows, and there's moments where you just get frustrated with her. And that's something that I think you're too old for that. You're a senior player. You're too old for that. You're putting the team in. It's frustrating because it's so preventable, and it's so annoying when she then goes and kind of appeals to the referee. How's that a yellow card? You can't trip someone from behind when they're running up the pitch. That's just not how football works. And yeah, so I don't really have anything like intelligent and analytical to say about this one, Tim. I just think it is frustrating, and I think Taylor Hines comes on against Chelsea and against Spurs, keeps a level head, and gives something Arsenal Katie McCabe wasn't providing them. So at least there's cover there, and it is a frustrating turn of events for a player that I think gives so much to this club.
Yeah, and it also tells you that Renee, she basically said it. She didn't trust her not to get a second yellow, and that has to be a concern, really. But also Olivia Smith comes on for Beth Mead, and Renee said afterwards, we've had to load Beth quite a lot. Obviously, she played both games in the international break because there's loads of injuries on the wing for England at the moment. Chloe Kelly can only play a handful of minutes at the moment. But, again, watching the LCL game last week, Freya Godfrey played on the right for LCL. She comes out with 2 goals and an assist. She absolutely tore Tottenham apart on that side. And from the first minute Olivia Smith is on, it's Arsenal look much more dangerous.
she changes this game, and obviously it doesn't work out in results way, but the energy she brings into the second half, that was a change I was really hoping was going to happen at halftime. I don't think it's Beth Mead's best game by any stretch, but I also think there's so much vulnerability behind Claire Hunt and Amanda Nilden. Like, those are two players, no disrespect for this Tottenham team, but I think those two players are their weakness on that left side. Those are players that don't like you to run at them. They don't like you to play direct, like be a direct winger. They kind of want you to have the ball at your feet and play back to the right back or play into the midfield and just shift the onus away from them. And Olivia Smith comes on and just basically exploits their vulnerability straight away. And I think she's a player, and there's also a miss pass. I think Lotte Wilbenmoy mispasses the ball, and Olivia Smith gut runs it back into the midfield, saves that transition. And this is just a player that Arsenal needs to build this team around. And I think it's good. Like, the injury is obviously not good that she's kind of had to warm into the squad. But I think the worst thing that could have happened to Olivia Smith this season is all the onus put on her. You need to start every game. You need to be the magic player. I think Beth Mead getting loading, it's obviously frustrating because if there's dips in form, she's playing too much. But I think that's actually a good thing for Olivia Smith, because I do think this Arsenal team over the last couple of seasons have liked to just pick out an individual and said, okay, save us. And I don't want her becoming that player yet, but she was that player in this game. I thought she was phenomenal. I think she knows when to take on Amanda Nilden and take it to the byline. I think she knows when to invert and maybe find the 10. So yeah, I thought Olivia Smith was the positive of this game, and probably the only one, but she was brilliant, and she should have had some early assists if it weren't for some misses in the 6-yard box.
Yeah, I would be shocked if Olivia Smith and Taylor Hines don't start on Wednesday against Real Madrid. She creates a great chance for Stina Blackstenius, which is the best chance of the game. It's a 0.58 XG chance. She just gets under it a little bit. Not a terrible finish by any means, but Arsenal this is the problem when you don't create loads of chances. Those ones, the ones you don't put away, really stick out. Smith herself has a shot which is well saved by Lisa Kopp, and again Renee referenced this after the game. Spurs obviously spot what's happening. That Arsenal's tactic has become give it to Olivia Smith and put your hands together and look to the sky. And Lisa Kopp goes down. I mean, we see this a lot in the WSL, and I'm not complaining because Arsenal do it all the time as well. But she actually goes down while play's still going on. That's quite rare. Usually the goalkeeper waits until there's a goal kick or something before they get a phantom bit of cramp. But Lisa Kopp goes down while the ball's still in play. And Renee referenced that afterwards. She said, yeah, goalkeeper goes down. Spurs change the way they're playing. They go to more, or they try to go to more of what Bayern were doing, which is go long and create second balls. I mean, Spurs create nothing at all in the second half. I'm not even sure they have a shot. They have a couple of corners. But I think they plug up that Arsenal's right-hand side. They understand what's going on. They make some changes. They put an extra player over there, and some of that threat extinguishes. I mean, Arsenal have 2 shots after the 70th minute in this game, and their last shot comes in the 81st minute from Mariona. And I felt, Jamie, the last few minutes, I really detected some panic. There were some misplaced passes. Daphne had a few. There was one that went a bit behind Steph Catley. I think she could get maybe, but it's just like, and I'm not accusing her of not trying. When I say there's a shrug, I don't mean an apathetic shrug. I mean a frustrated kind of, this just isn't our day. Like, I didn't think Arsenal were going to score in that last 15 minutes. 45 to 65 minutes, I felt we might score. Last 20, 25 minutes, I thought we can't even pass the ball at the moment. And I think that really just looks like a symptom of a team very low on confidence.
Yeah, the mentality falls. And I think the goalkeeper injury to Lisa Kopp is exactly what does that. And I think there's 2 ways to look at this last 20 minutes. Good for Tottenham, for like as much as that hurts to say, because last season their in-game management and their problem solving under Robert Villahan became quite deplorable. Like, when something kind of fell apart for them, they would just let it crumble to the ground rather than try to kind of fix the issues. And we saw that playing them twice, home and away, especially at home. Every time something went wrong, it just got worse and worse and worse. And I think Martin Ho has brought a style of football into this team where every player works for it. I think it was at the Emirates when the ball went to Hayley Rasso and she just kind of like falls on the ground on the touchline and lets it. And that doesn't happen in Martin Ho's Tottenham anymore. And that's a positive for them, because I think their in-game management and the way they saw that is good. However, it's a pretty simple thing to fix. Mark Olivia Smith, Arsenal have no issues. So yes, Tottenham good, better than last season. Still, let's not celebrate a 0-0 draw in a North London derby. That frustrates me, even if you're nowhere near the level. I just think the fact that they were able to say, if you just stick an extra man near Amanda Nilden and Claire Hunt and just not give Olivia Smith the breath, Arsenal, the squad that have won the Champions League, no other player on that pitch will find it in them to fix the problem. And that is so frustrating. And that happened, I think, when it started to fall apart against Bayern Munich. I don't think that was necessarily the players' fault, but I think, and this, I'm sure we have a million questions about this in the second half, I do think there's a point where you need to look at this team. And if you get rid of the Champions League, I know it's stupid to say that, but if you just pass on the Champions League and you're looking at, okay, is Renee Slegers the problem? The same thing has happened under Joe Montemurro and Jonas Eidevall. These players give up at a certain point when things aren't going their way, and then you need an injection of energy that's something adverse that you shouldn't actually need in football. And I know that that's how football works, right? These situations happen, but this is the perfect, this happens, this continues to happen. It happened under Jonas and it's happening now. And I think there are questions that need to be asked of the manager and the recruitment, but there is a certain responsibility that needs to be placed on the players in this last 20 minutes where, okay, why are you relying on the 21-year-old to take on the entire Tottenham team? And why can no one else in this team that won the Champions League solve the issues? And that was something that I think Tottenham, good for you, but I do think they got too much praise for it. I just think Arsenal didn't have answers, and it's frustrating. And the last 20 minutes were pretty dire, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. So sometimes there are some phrases that managers say that really stay with me in press conferences, and one of them was Jonas, maybe during his second season or third, at the end of his second season, I think he said something like, "We're at our best when there's energy in the game." And that always made me slightly worry for the reasons you've set out, because it's like you can't have that every minute of every game and every season. That's something that that will only happen a few times in a season. What seasons are about, if you want to win the league, what does your 7 out of 10 level look like? That's what wins you the league, right? You're playing, having these massive spikes, that wins you cups, and Arsenal have won cups doing that. And Renee was talking afterwards, and I completely understand what she's saying, and she's completely right. She was pointing, to the Champions League and saying, I think almost as a message to her players, it's like, look at how good we are when we're at our best. And I completely understand that, and that is completely correct. Like this team, these players went and won 4-1 at Lyon. They beat Barcelona in the Champions League final, and it wasn't a fluke. The problem is that the peak performance cannot and does not happen every single week. Your question is, can you be 7 out of 10 and win 2-0? And for me, there's just too much distance between Arsenal performances. There's too much of our best performance looks great, but you can't do that every week. And it reminds me a bit of a question I asked Renee at the beginning of the season. I asked her about not really having a proper number 6 and whether that had really been fixed in the transfer window. And she said, yeah, but when we're well organised, we know we can stop that from happening. And to an extent, she's right. And Arsenal were well organised yesterday, and they did stop that happening. The problem is, again, you're not going to be well organised every minute of every game. So stuff like Bayern's first goal on Wednesday night, Arsenal's positioning is dreadful. It's amateur. But that's going to happen. And when it happens, you need players who can run fast and run back, right? You need those players who can bail you out. It's exactly the same in attack. You buy good attackers because when it's not going for you, they can do something for you. And it's the same off the ball. And I just feel like, and Jonas did this as well, there's too much talk almost of look at what our best performance looks like. And I get that, and you want to do that more often. But for me, it's what does our average performance look like? And to me, our average performance looks below average. And there's too much veering between 5 and 9 out of 10. And we'll probably go more into that in the second half, because there's more specific questions about that. But before we go for a break, Jamie, I mean, what would you identify as not even the biggest reason, the biggest thing that's perhaps bugging you or annoying you about this funk Arsenal are in at the moment?
The biggest thing that's annoying me at the moment is it feels like every game is something that I think that managers say a lot is like we focus on the game ahead of us. And that is just basically them saying like we don't want to, overthink the long picture. But it really does feel like Arsenal are going into every game in isolation and not having any sort of identity. There's no sort of long range plan on, okay, how do we kind of make this squad work for a whole season? How do we keep the level consistent? How do we work on this team so that it can win games in a row, not just one result and then a couple draws? It feels like every game is taken in such isolation that there's no consistency. Like the team that we saw play against Chelsea did not play against Spurs. They were both draws, but it was completely different. And I understand it differs in opposition, but right now I just feel like this team, and it could be manager, it could be squad building. These are things that I think it is accumulation of, and we'll go into it more in the second half. But right now, this team does not know who they are. And that is so concerning for a team that won the Champions League. Because I feel like every single Arsenal fan, when that full-time whistle went in Lisbon, said, okay, this is the start of something. This is a manager. This is the start of an era, a really, really successful era for this football club. And right now, it feels like this team is just as unsure of themselves right now as they were when they drew to Everton and lost to Bayern and lost to Chelsea last season. And that is frustrating because, okay, what's your identity? What's the future proof? And right now, I just feel like this team, the players, they don't know their role and they don't know who they are. And that's a frustrating place to be in, Tim.
Yeah, I think I don't know how much Renee looks back or how much coaches do this, but I feel like she had an amazing situation this summer where she just won the Champions League with a squad with an average age of 28, 29, and she had the power and the authority to really do, because a rebuild has, like, the age of the team means a rebuild has to happen anyway, has to. And it feels like Arsenal parked that work. It just feels to me a little bit like Renee froze, to be honest. And I have my doubts as to whether she'll be in whether she'll get that chance again in terms of the position of authority and power she had to maybe make some big decisions, and maybe some big decisions just weren't made. And maybe we're paying the price for it at the moment. On that cheery note, we will take a break here in the second half, where all the questions are obviously really upbeat and about how good we are. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with your questions which were submitted on BlueSky. And the first one I'm going to ask you, Jamie, is from Shane at TokenBG. Has the January window become even more important than it already was? Are we in a place now where we're in serious danger of coming fourth, which in turn could harm our recruitment for next season? Is accelerating 1 or 2 deals in January essential to ensure we finish at least third?
I think that there needs to be business in January done from an Arsenal perspective, but I also think it's frustrating because the mid-season transfer window, you don't want to be using it to change the future of your squad. You don't want to be saying, okay, these are the signings that are going to be our future players in this squad. That business needed to be done in the summer, and that's frustrating because you have a lengthy period of time in the summer. You have international tournaments where you can look at players that you don't usually get to look at, and you've just won the Champions League. That's the prime chance to sign these players. The January transfer window is, okay, you've got players in several competitions that are mid-season. It's going to be hard to get them. Maybe you've got the NWSL, maybe you've got the Damesvenskan. I don't think, other than maybe Smilia Holmberg, because I have to hype her up now apparently. I don't think we should be looking at that route anymore. Like, it's hard because the players available, it's not this big plethora that you want it to be. I do think that Arsenal needs to do business in January, because I think that Kim Little is a fantastic player, and I think that she should start for this Arsenal team. But the fact that we are collapsing because a 35-year-old is not fit right now is a indictment of the depth. And I think it's frustrating because Kim Little deserves to be the most important player in this team. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that we're relying on her, but it is kind of ridiculous that we've gotten to the point where it's 2025, and if Kim Little's injured, Arsenal's midfield are atrocious. So I think that needs to be changed. I really do think there needs to be a big signing there, a signing that can impact maybe an attacking player. The other frustration I have is, I think obviously you raised that earlier, Tim. I think it's the perfect point. Kim Little doesn't play, Russo's the 10, but we have many other players that can play the 10. Okay, why are the profiles not fitting the way you want to play? Because business needs to be done there if that's the case. If the players you have aren't going to fit your system when one piece of the puzzle isn't there, then yeah, business needs to be done. So I think, yeah, the midfield needs to be addressed. The CDM needs to be addressed because, yeah, it's not good to be relying on one player for the entire team to fall apart.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a big window, a really big window. I think quite a bit of business needs to be done. I do think it will be. But do you have a question for me?
I do. This one is from at Becca Derby. This says, do you think part of the issue this season is that Arsenal have been too predictable in both tactics and substitutes? Is that a product of Slegers trying to take the emotion out of decisions? At times, it has felt like the way we play doesn't maximise the skills or talents enough of our players. How would you change it up to make them more effective? So do you think it is predictability, and would you change that in any way?
Yes, I do think there's an element of predictability. I think the substitutions, it's weird because at the beginning of Renee's reign, we were really praising her substitutions and how much earlier she was making them than Jonas. But and she has explained before, there's an element she says they plan for scenarios, right? So it's not just we are going to do Frida Festina on 60 minutes, come what may. It's if the game looks like this, we're going to do this. If the game looks like this, we're going to do this. So there is an element of pre-programming the subs, which Renee has said before. She finds that useful because, yeah, it takes the emotion out of the decision. And I understand that. I think most coaches do that, to be fair. I think most coaches will not be completely rigid. So Taylor and Olivia Smith coming on at half-time, I don't think that was pre-planned. I think Smith for Mead and Hines for McCabe, yeah, they're predictable subs. I don't think she was planning to do them at half-time. I think circumstances took over that meant that happened. But I think I'm less... There is an element of predictability to the substitutions. In Munich on Wednesday, like obviously I update the lineup and stuff for the post-match quotes. And as soon as I saw the players ready to come on, I wrote the substitutions down. I knew what they were, basically. But I'm less... I think that's a peripheral or cerebral thing. For me, there is predictability in the way Arsenal play, or rather, I think Renee's got to that stage that so many WSL coaches get to, where you get to a year, people realise what you're doing and they adapt. And then it's, can you respond? Can you either do it better or can you respond and evolve? And so many managers don't do it in the WSL. We saw it under Jonas as well. Like, the best season was his first season. And after that, people cottoned onto it. Same with Joe Montemuro. It's why I'm side-eyeing slightly about Jeglerts at Man City and Martin Ho at Tottenham. The challenge for them is to come when teams recognise how they've changed a little bit more. And listen, maybe those coaches will be fine with it, but I think that's, TBC. And yeah, I think basically it is kind of as simple as that. Teams have worked it out, and at the moment there isn't doesn't seem to be an answer. I think another thing I'd go into here as well a little bit is, I think the issue with this team is there's like 3 or 4 players that are real load-bearing walls that we ask to do lots and lots of jobs. So Mariana, we ask her to be the whole midfield, basically. Russo, we ask her to be a 10 and a 9. And then like Kim Little, she comes out, the whole thing collapses. Leah comes out, we can't pass out from the back for 5 games. It takes ages to sort that out. And then like Emily Fox, we're asking her to invert and overlap. Oh, and by the way, guys, can you all do this for every single minute of every single game? And then the rest of the players just don't look clear on what their jobs are, to be honest. And viewing with interest, like conversations online about specific individual players, which I get. But for me, if you've got one player that's inconsistent or underperforming, that's on the player. But we've got 5 or 6 at the moment who are wildly inconsistent from game to game. And I'm sorry, that comes down to a systemic or coaching issue when that happens. And it just looks to me like there are like 3 or 4 players we asked to do the job of 8 players. And then there are like 5 or 6 where it's like, yeah, you guys just, do what you need to do when the ball comes to you. It doesn't look like a unit to me. And that's why the team is like collapsing when you take out a player like Leah, when you take out a player like Kim, because the roles aren't clear enough. And good players like Kyra Cooney-Cross, Victoria Pelova, like are coming in. And it's a bit like, oh, what am I meant to be doing again? The wingers are really inconsistent at the moment. And yeah, it just looks to me like with the Kim and Mariana thing, Jamie, I've been wondering for ages, like, is Renee doing that because that represents what she wants from her double pivot, or is she doing that because it's the only thing that's kind of worked? And I think I've made my mind up which one it is. And I think there's a lot of knots here to untangle, to be honest. Let me ask you, I was going to ask one from Max Radwan, but I think you've kind of answered it, which is tactically but culturally, would it be fair to say Renee's failed to instill a clear identity on this Arsenal side? I think you've kind of answered that. And I guess let's look at this one then from Han Solo. Have we psychologically spiraled in this block?
Such a good one. Yeah, I would say so. I would say that's exactly what's happening. I think it just feels like we spoke about this in the mailbag, saying this block is so massive, not just for individuals, but for the side. And it has gone pretty terribly, to say it like nicely. Obviously, there's one game left, but that game is a must win as well at this stage in the Champions League. So I would say that it feels like right now the adversity has happened, and it happened against Bayern Munich. It maybe happened against Chelsea, with the referee decisions. It obviously happened against Tottenham. And the players have no idea how to kind of say, okay, that was bad that happened to us. And we played really badly that game. How do we then build from that and not let that happen again? Instead of that, it's a bit like, we can't really bounce back from this, and this has happened to us, and we're just going to kind of plow through the exact same thing, trying to put a square through a circle and hope that it kind of pays off. And I think so much of that comes to mentality, but that just opens up a wider conversation. Why is this happening psychologically? Because last season, Renee came in as interim and she instilled this new vibe into the training ground. The players were happy to come to work again. They were playing with more confidence. They knew their role. They knew what they were doing. So why has that unraveled? And why has it unraveled so badly this block? I don't think it's just this block. We saw this last block. It started honestly at Lee Sports Village when there was no answers against the Man United block. It started at the Joy when it was a completely different team to what we've seen historically. Aston Villa had no idea how to break them down. This has been happening all season, and it's so hard to pinpoint why a team that they won the Champions League last season because of vibe and because of the fact that this underdog narrative carried them and they were playing for each other. What happened in the summer for that not to happen anymore? And that was the biggest question we all asked of Renee this season. Can you do it when there's no longer like the big media push of you being this hero that's saving the team? And I don't think the onus comes just on her. There is a mentality issue in this squad right now, and it's so hard to kind of, when you're not in the building, when you're not with the players, how do we say, okay, it's a psychological thing? But it does seem like that. The players aren't making second efforts. They're not tracking back. You've got one or two individuals doing all the defensive work. Olivia Smith and Emily Fox running their legs off against Spurs, whereas the left side don't want to track back nearly as much. And it's frustrating because there's no answers. And I think the biggest thing for this season, last season was perfect for Arsenal. Everything in that Champions League campaign went their way. There were no major injuries. They got very lucky with the personnel. Everyone was fit to play. Daphne van Domselaar was just ready enough to come back for the Champions League final. This season, it's not been like that, and that's football. Like last season was a bit of a unicorn, right? Like we've seen what happens to this Arsenal squad when there's injuries. This season, it's not like that anymore, and the team don't have the mental resilience to come back from it. And maybe did they have it last season, or was it just easier to deal with because nothing went wrong? So yeah, I think psychologically, it seems to be the biggest thing right now. It's a deeper conversation on squad building and management, in my opinion. However, the players are paid professional footballers, and they still have to do a job no matter what. And right now, it doesn't feel like they're showing up.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a psychological angle to it. I think it starts tactically, and I think They just look low on confidence to me at the moment. There's bits of like the first half against Bayern's really good. The second half against Chelsea is really good. 20 minutes of the second half here is really good, but there isn't that consistent, almost flatline level of performance. Do you have a question for me?
I do. This one's quite interesting. I think this might be a wider picture WSL thing right now, but it's from @SelenaFriday, and it says, should we factor in the fact that the 3 WSL teams playing in Europe are starting to struggle, especially with the new Champions League format?
Yeah, it's a factor. Definitely. For Arsenal, I'd put it low down the list of factors, but it's definitely a factor. Not least because people are playing 2 pot 1 teams. So we've we've played Lyon and Bayern. Those are 2 really, really good teams. Chelsea are going to play Barcelona. I forget who their other pot 1 team is, but Man United are going through a period where they've got like PSG and Wolfsburg back to back. It's definitely a factor. It's interesting. I had a discussion with a friend of mine at half time on Wednesday, who's a Bayern season ticket holder, and at this point, obviously Arsenal are 2-0 up and flying, and she was saying to me, this is because Bayern aren't challenged in the Frauen Bundesliga. She was like, they played on Friday night. They won like 6-1 or something. And she was like, and Arsenal are challenged every week in the WSL. And she was like, this is showing in the intensity. And the interesting thing is, I think that kind of flipped in the second half. And I do think a part of the issue against Bayern was fatigue as well. There were some very tired players. And that's kind of where it works against you, where it's like, okay, we've played Chelsea on Saturday and we clawed back a last-minute equaliser. And these guys have played Friday night because the Frauen Bundesliga, like some other leagues in Europe, they help with the kickoff times. They put things back. And the fact that they've had a nice, easy game actually counts for them in the second half. So I do think there's an element of that, yeah. But I think it gives and it takes away. I think it can help you in terms of having that intensity all the time. I remember when Barca lost to Lyon a couple of years ago in the final, a lot of the Barca players kind of said, we weren't used to this intensity. We had the League One in March. So when Lyon came at us, we couldn't cope with it. But then in the Men's Champions League last year, PSG win it. And a big part of them winning it is because they've got the League One in February and they were able to focus on the Champions League. So I do think this is like very yin and yang. But I do also think the level of the WSL is better. Even just London City Lionesses alone makes that the case. And I think everyone's playing more intense, pressing football. There are fewer, we're just going to put 10 at the back and hope not to lose 3-0. So it's a factor, definitely. But like I say, I wouldn't say it's a defining factor for Arsenal. We've got some I think very understandably, some very should we say 1,000-foot view kind of questions, maybe about the structure around Renee. And this one's from Summer at Lot3WM. Will we ever reach the end of the line with Claire Wheatley? Our shortfalls in recent seasons largely stem from poor squad building. When Arteta and Edu became misaligned, Edu left and was replaced with Berta, who gave the men's team our most successful transfer window in years. Meanwhile, we've had 11 years with Claire Wheatley, been through 4 head coaches and probably heading towards finding a 5th, 1 league title to show for it from 7 seasons ago, and even the Champions League win didn't seem to spark our recruitment to life, so what will? So really, I guess this is a question about recruitment and I guess what happens above the head coach.
I think this is such a fair question and such a fair attitude that Arsenal fans have. They've had probably all season. I think there's a few that have been quite vocal about it, but especially after this game. And I think it's completely valid. I remember one of the first podcasts we did together, Tim, you said something that the Arsenal fans probably want more of is just transparency from Claire Wheatley. We don't hear from her ever. We don't know who she's like the big brother in 1984. She just kind of, is she even a real person? Or I don't really know. I just feel like there's no transparency there. So it does feel like, okay, this squad depth isn't there. Who do we blame? Because we don't really know the reasoning behind it. We don't know the character behind it. And I think when you look at a decade of underperformance from a WSL point of view, it's really, really easy to place the blame there. And I think it's completely fair. I think that last season when Chelsea had it, Khadijah Buchanan did her ACL, they went and bought Naomi Yemi Goma in the January transfer window for a world record breaking fee. They went and signed Kira Walsh in January for a world record breaking fee. Arsenal don't do that. They sign these really great players on free transfers, but they don't fight aggressively in the market when other clubs are competing. The only time that's ever happened is with Olivia Smith. And I think it's frustrating because you look at this kind of like, it's not just signing players. I think it's also retaining players because it's easy. And I'm not even like pointing fingers at specific players in this squad right now, but I do think there's a senior maybe bracket of players in this Arsenal squad right now that are just happy being Arsenal players, and they will never leave the club because they are very happy being Arsenal players. And Claire Wheatley is very happy having them at the club. And that's not saying I think we should uproot the entire squad. I think there's an element of the fact that you do need to upgrade. And yes, this player is very good, but okay, how do you go and win the WSL? Because it hasn't happened in 7 years. So what happens then? Do you upgrade or do you keep the players happy? And I think that's something that Chelsea have just done so well. They continue to upgrade their squad. They can like Trinity Rodman. I bet you she ends up at Chelsea, and they'll sign the money for it. They've just signed Reading Cannerit on an extension, but they'll upgrade her because they know that they have to if they need to. And that's something that's not happened in this Arsenal squad. In the summer transfer window, Leah Volti says, "I've done all I can at this squad, at this team, at this club. Loved my journey. I'm going to move on." And Arsenal say, "Great, that makes it easier for us because maybe in the future we don't have to cull you, but we're also not going to fix or fill your hole, and we're going to make every other player there kind of do your job." And I think, I cannot remember who said this, but someone said Mariona Caldente playing in the pivot, like it's good, it's because she's good there, but you're also wasting one of the best attacking midfielders in the world because the club do not want to put the effort, money, funds, or just research into the market to go buy a player that can naturally play there in order to then boost up the rest of the players. So I think the squad build has been, it's complacent. I don't think it's horrible because I think there's been some good signings, but I think it's complacent, and that's something that, like even Man City, I think their defense is deplorable, but they keep upgrading their forwards. They keep signing new players. Okay, let's go get Carolyn, even though we already have Chloe Kelly and Fagino and Lauren Hemp. Like, let's just upgrade those players. Arsenal don't do that. They want to keep everyone happy, and I think this is a team that wants a powerhouse that are quite toothless and not scary in the market. No one's scared of Arsenal when Claire Wheatley shows up at the table. So, I can completely understand the frustrations.
Yeah, I think my take on this, like at the moment, again, I'm slightly concerned by an interview Jonas gave after he left where he talked about like being a bit overloaded in terms of like Arsenal have all these departments now, but he was really felt like he was responsible for joining it all up. And I wonder if that's changed. I don't honestly know. I think for me, my disappointment with Renee is, like I said earlier, she had a once in a career opportunity. You're a young coach, and she's not an inexperienced coach, by the way. Like, she managed Rosengård. She won league titles as a manager. This is not her first job. I see that said a lot, and it's not. She had a once in a career opportunity as a young coach who'd won the Champions League with an aging squad, and she had all the authority in the world to go, right, I've arrived. This is going to be Renee Slegers' Arsenal now. And that turnover, it doesn't have to be pejorative. It doesn't have to be because players are crap or complacent or too comfortable. It's just age. Like, it has to happen anyway. Even if they were, like winning WSL titles, that time is coming anyway. And she had such a massive position of authority to go, right, this is going to be my squad playing my football. And I've got a contract and I've got the Champions League. I can go and do that. And just didn't do it. And for me, it's not about, I'm not interested in my own opinion about which players should go, which players should stay, blah, blah, blah. I'm interested in the coach's opinion on that, right? So, for example, again, on the men's side, when Mikel Arteta chinned Aubameyang and got rid of him, I was a bit dubious about that because I was like, where are our goals going to come from? But I backed it as a fan because I was like, if that's what you want, if that's what you need to do to make this squad yours, and he chinned Mesut Ozil when there was no other number 10, and he just had to swallow it for a few months until he could get another one. But for me, it's like I look at Unai Emery in the men's team, and it's like, you can't even decide who the captain is. You're useless. Like, you cannot make a decision about anything. Whereas with Arteta, it was like, I can question those decisions, but if that's what you need to do to make this your squad, do it. Get it done. And that's how I feel about this. So it's not about like, do I think this player should stay? I don't really know, but it's like, I want to know what Renee wants. What do you want this team to look like? What type of football do you want it to play? And I still don't really know. And I think she's just missed an opportunity. And if Renee, she delegates a lot, she says she prefers to leave like a lot of the recruitment side to recruitment team, and I kind of think that's fine. But then there needs to be firmer decisions above her. If that's going to be the case, there needs to be a firmer, you know what? Okay, you coach the team. We're going to sort some of this out now, and we're going to, and it just doesn't. It feels to me like maybe that piece is missing a little bit. There has been some change behind the scenes at Arsenal. So Richard Garlick is now the CEO. Richard Garlick used to be like Claire Wheatley's line manager, effectively. So he was very involved with the operations of the women's team. So, I hope there's some kind of reorganisation there. It doesn't have to be like someone getting sacked or anything. I would like to see an addition there. I'd like to see like Chelsea have Paul Green, who's a very canny operator. Someone like that. It doesn't have to be instead of Claire, but maybe alongside Claire. I don't have like a 2020 vision on what goes on, but to me, it feels like there's something missing. And the job of Arsenal coach now is not really just to be a coach. It's this needs to, like, the squad needs rebuilding. Just because of age, it needs rebuilding, and it needs someone to take firm decisions, and I'm afraid those decisions just haven't been taken. So while we're on a bit of a roll, and I have had 2 coffees, by the way, you can probably tell. I'm going to ask you this one, Jamie, from Helen M at HXM829. Thoughts on Renee contract extension? Current contract's up, the end of the season. I'm in favour. We were 2-0 up v Bayern, and she needs to make subs to manage loads. For me, it's a squad issue, as she should be able to make subs without the team then letting 3 goals in 30 minutes. She then asks, are there plans for Berta to look at the women's team? I have asked this. At the moment, no, because I think his plate's a bit full with the men's side. Edu did eventually have some involvement with the women's team, and I'm told that happened quite organically. Because he started to take an interest and things settled down on the men's side. I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah, what do you think on a potential, like Renee's contract up at the end of the season? What would you do with that?
Yeah, quite a few questions on that. It's interesting. I just think it's hard because there's so many things I think that need to be addressed if you're looking into a decision of, okay, if Arsenal finish this season without a trophy, okay, what do you do with the head coach situation? Because I think for this squad, despite the fact that we think maybe it's not at the level it should be, it still should be winning trophies domestically, and it should be competing in Europe, right? We saw that last season. So do you have to look at the head coach? Yes, I completely agree. Who else is then available in the market that you think can come to Arsenal and have an effect on these players, instill something? Because like I said earlier, what's happening with Renee right now is what has happened to the last 2 managers very quickly after a good first season, very heroic. This is the start of something great. Fall off a mountain, everything falls. What is causing that? Because it can't just be a bad run in managers. So I think this is the manager that won the Champions League. And if it was easy, Emma Hayes would have done it. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's a really massive feat to be able to do that. And I don't think it's just luck. She needs to do a lot, and Renee does a lot to win the Champions League. However, if she exits this season trophyless, I understand the conversations, but I still think there is something fundamentally at the root of this club right now, not the club, the women's side, that is wrong and is not operating these players to their full capacity. I think that there is so much potential in this squad, despite the fact that it needs to be increased. And I just think, if you don't back the manager, what happens next? It's going to happen again. It's going to continue to happen again. You can't just say, let's get a new head coach, have a really good season, and then fall off again. I think so much needs to change in the back room. That comes from squad advisement. That comes from recruitment. Maybe that comes from her coaching team as well. Like, I know she was a part of the coaching team, but this is basically your own side of our staff right now. Just the things need to change there. So I think if she wins a trophy, you keep her, you extend her for a year. I wouldn't extend her for more than that. But I don't think there's a manager right now that I'm going to say, yes, get rid of Renee if we go trophyless, because there will be an immediate fix and it will fix all the issues. I think there's been too many issues for too long in this Arsenal side that keeps happening fix that and find the root cause of that before we say, okay, it's just the head coach, because I don't think that's true. The head coach has a 100% responsibility, but I don't think it's completely true. Also, on what Helen said about Bayern Munich, I do think that was the fault of the coach. I think the substitutions were wrong in that. I don't think it was, you should be able to manage loads and hope the players, everything is situational, and if you can't manage the game and pick the right personnel, I do think that's on the manager. So long story short, I think there's bigger issues, but I can understand why the question's being weighed up.
Yeah, I wouldn't extend the contract at the moment. I think there's work to do. If in 3 months' time all of these issues have been solved, we're smashing teams 5-0 again, good January window, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, at that point. But I don't think you can do it at the moment. And I guess it's another thing. And again, I don't have 2020 insight onto this, but everything just feels very slow, like behind the scenes in terms of appointing Renee permanently took ages, and I don't understand why. And then over the summer, I was fully expecting her contract to be extended. I believe will to do that. I'm not really clear on why it hasn't happened. I know there's been will to extend the contracts of a few key players as well. Russo's done. The others, don't know why they're not. Again, I was expecting September, October. Like, it seems to have taken a very, very long time. Chloe Kelly, slam dunk signing in the summer, took ages to get it done. Like, it does feel like things move quite slowly behind the scenes. It has to be said, but you can't give Renee a new contract at the moment. She has to show that she can sort this out. But I'm with you as well. Like, even if you make the decision that Renee's not the person to take Arsenal forward, that's not the only change I think that would need to be made. How about, why don't we wrap up here a little bit? This one's from at Ariella W. To what degree do you feel like this season has been player mental complacency versus being a relatively inexperienced manager versus a misused squad versus insufficient recruitment? So I think the 4 pillars have been identified there. All 4 areas are factors, but if I'm going back and forth trying to see if one stands out above the rest as a root cause.
I think, 100% all four play a big part in it. The biggest thing I think it is it just comes down to identity. And I think if a team and a manager have an identity, you can then work out those 4 players. Okay, what players do we need to recruit to fit that system and that identity, the style of football we want to play? It's not just the style of football. It's, okay, how do we include every single player in this squad to work towards that goal? Because I completely echo what you said earlier, Tim. There is a starting 11 in this team, maybe starting 12 or 13 that have roles and no one else does, right? I think that having an identity that, okay, you can Kyrie Cooney-Cross can affect this game in this way. She can then come in to, work against teams that need, she needs to carry the ball more. She needs to play longer passes. Okay, someone like Taylor Hines can come on for Katie McCabe when you want someone that's going to play a higher line, maybe. That needs to be what's going on in this side, and that's not what's going on in this side. Someone like Victoria Pelova 2 seasons ago, I thought she was the messiah, and now I actually struggle to watch her because she looks lost. She looks absolutely clueless out there, and that's a player that we might lose as a result of the fact that there's no identity. And then it comes down to mentality. Why would a player want to play for a team where they don't feel like they have a role? Jenna Niswonger showing up to training every day must be awful right now. Same as Kyra Cooney-Cross and Victoria Pelova. What's my role in this squad? Because I can guarantee as soon as Kim Little's back, Kyra Cooney-Cross and Victoria Pelova don't have a role in this squad. Right now I'm looking at Alessia Russo and saying, okay, what can I do that what's missing here? So I think that also feeds into it. There's player mentality and there's recruitment that can be fixed by the fact that a club has an identity and a manager has an identity. And then I think Renee is so unsure of what she wants to do as well. Like, she shows up to games and it's kind of like, do I trust my players? Are there players here that are Jonas Eidevall signings that I don't trust? I don't know what I want to do with them. Then can I play them when I need them in the harder moments? Can I trust them to come on? So I think the biggest thing for me is it's none of those things. I think the end goal that this club doesn't have right now is the issue. Like, Renee doesn't know where she wants to take this team. There's no philosophy going forward. Therefore, how can you then do the other four things? I don't think one comes out on top. I think it's just a bigger, broader issue. If you have a exact, like Renee says, okay, this is what I want to achieve. How then do I pick my players to be able to get there? How then do I improve their mentality when they show up for work every day? That is the thing that I think needs to be fixed. And I think those other four components will be fixed because of that. Right now, I just think, like I've said it a million times on this podcast, it's so frustrating. I don't think this club and this women's side right now know where they want to be and who they want to be. And that is then feeding in and just bleeding into every other area.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll say that this isn't about like my opinion of individual players, but for me, it's like, if you've got no use for Victoria Pelova, sell her. If you can't work out how to use Kyra Cooney-Cross, sell her. Like, make some decisions. And if you've got no role for Jenna Niswanger, sell her. Like, why are we keeping these players around who it's probably just bad vibes as well, to have so many players kind of sitting there going, I don't know what my role is, and I don't know if I'm going to play. And if I am, then I have to rescue the whole. It has to be like a big rescue operation. Like, I think what we've really suffered from here is just a lack of decisions being made, a lack of clarity, a lack of, the assertiveness to say, this player is a good player, but she doesn't fit into my team, so she's gone, and I'm getting someone that does fit in. That's what I'd put the biggest problem down to. Should we do one more?
Yeah, go on. Would you like me to go? Or do you have one ready for you, Tim?
Yeah, let's end on a lighter note, a slightly different note. This one's from Katina McStenius at Laguna Beach. Thoughts on London hosting the Champions Cup? Obviously, no travel is an advantage for us, but is a neutral venue club tournament in England during the winter a good idea? Would a trip to a warm climate actually benefit the squad more than 2 extra games in London? And will English fans embrace the tournament? So this is about the Champions Cup in February, end of January, February, being in London. Do you think it'd be better for the players to get away? How do you see all of this?
I would love them to go on a trip. I remember when the men's side went to Dubai and then started winning games again. I'd love that to happen. I think that it being in London is not good. It's good for travel, all that, we talk about international breaks and periods off, and we want less travel and the schedule to be less condensed. Yes, it's good that they have to stay in London. However, I think that this team, like, it's November, it's not even December yet. This team need to get away from their environment and figure out, like, just get a break. And I think that this tournament would have been fun for that to be elsewhere. Not far, maybe it can stay in Europe, but I don't think it needs to be in cold, rainy London in the middle of January, because I'm glad I'm not going to be there. And in terms of the interest, I don't see any like Chelsea fans wanting to watch this unless they're big Gotham fans, because they might win the NWSL, so that's exciting. However, yeah, I think for the team it would have been nice to just get a suntan, have a non-alcoholic pina colada. I don't know. I just don't think it's going to work very well.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a story to be told about the organisation of this, which has been, from what I understand, pretty chaotic anyway. Which is why we still have a complete lack of details about the stadiums that are going to be used and how it's all going to work. Maybe that's something I can say more about another time, but I personally, I'm glad it's in London. I'm glad I don't have to travel, particularly, I think, because if Arsenal are to qualify for the next phase of the Champions League, they're probably going to have to do the punishment round in February, the round of 16, which, is another factor as well that's perhaps makes January important as well. As for will fans from London take to it, I mean, I think, as the song goes, Arsenal are massive everywhere they go. I think there'll be plenty of Arsenal fans there, not because it's the Champions Cup, though, because it's Arsenal, and Arsenal will be there in force. And I do think, assuming Arsenal win their semi-final and a likely final with Gotham, I do think that would create a bit of a buzz. I really think women's football has to work out a way to get NWSL and WSL teams and big European teams playing each other more. I'm actually a fan of like a Club World Cup idea in women's football. I think there's space for it. and I think it would help the growth of the game. So if you did get like an Arsenal Gotham game, I do think that would be really good, but I'm not anticipating a huge promotional run up to it because I don't think it's going to be organised well enough or quickly enough for that. So yeah, let's leave it there, Jamie. I feel like the little vein in my forehead has just kind of started to relax a little bit. Thanks as ever for helping us through this therapy session.
Thanks for that, Tim. Always nice to relive the trauma with you.
And what we'll do, we'll probably do like another mailbag next week or something during the international break after the Real Madrid game. Obviously, I'll be at the Madrid game on Wednesday as usual, doing all the usual coverage. And like I said at the top, if you're listening to this on Monday, do vote for us in the FSA Awards as Best Fan Media, particularly if you value what we do on the women's side, which we still believe is unique in the women's game. And yeah, we'll leave it there and we'll come back next week after we thrash Real Madrid and the world looks a little bit brighter, hopefully.